Stick around to the end of this video, folks, because I've got some announcements to make. Anyway, back to the video. In 1964, less than half a decade after Senegal gained its independence, around 47% of its GDP went straight into the pockets of its politicians. Now it has some of the lowest levels of inequality and corruption in Africa. How did Senegal make this change? To answer this question, we have to go back in time, before its colonial period. The Wolof, Serer, and Tukulóor and other ethnic groups in Senegal had well-established political and social structures. Chiefs, kings, or religious leaders governed their respective communities, and they often played a crucial role in maintaining order, resolving disputes, and ensuring social cohesion. However, it is essential to recognize that colonialism also had a profound impact on indigenous institutions. After colonizing Senegal, France often incorporated some elements of the existing indigenous institutions into its colonial administrative system. This incorporation was sometimes done for administrative convenience or to co-opt local elites into collaborating with the colonial regime. Imposition of colonial rule disrupted the traditional systems of governance and led to significant changes in social, political, and economic dynamics. Indigenous institutions were in many cases subordinate to the colonial administration, and their powers and authority were often curtailed. This created a top-down administrative system that centralized power in the hands of the colonial authorities. These colonial institutions were designed to benefit the French at the expense of the Senegalese. Senegal also inherited a strong legal framework from its past under the French Empire, from the mid-19th century until it gained independence in 1960. During this time, France established a legal system in Senegal based on French civil law tradition. French civil law is based on the principle of the rule of law, which holds that the law applies equally to all individuals, including those in positions of power. This legal tradition places a strong emphasis on the independence of the judiciary and the separation of powers between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. This has helped to maintain a tradition of respecting the rule of law in Senegal. And in the 1860s, the Ottoman Empire was experiencing instability, and the French were investing heavily in Senegal's infrastructure and economy. This attracted Lebanese traders and merchants. The French colonial government in Senegal guaranteed religious freedom, which was attractive to many Lebanese who worked as street vendors. After World War I, the Lebanese migration to Senegal expanded sharply. This was due to a number of factors, including the establishment of the French Mandate of Lebanon, which made travel between Lebanon and France's colonies easier. When Senegal was still a colony of France in the 1950s, the economy was dominated by French businesses, and the Senegalese population suffered from widespread poverty and illiteracy. The majority of the country's wealth was concentrated in the hands of a small elite. So its independence in 1960 was a major turning point, as it allowed Senegal to chart its own course and develop its own institutions. Its independence was led by the Parti de Regroupement Africain, a secular, nationalist and socialist party, and most small French traders left the country. However, indigenous Senegalese people began to compete increasingly with the Lebanese in the peanut sector. Then, later in the 1960s, the government made the bold decision to nationalize key industries like banking, transportation, and telecommunications. This reduced the concentration of wealth and made it harder for large landowners and businessmen to enrich themselves at the expense of the poor. However, while Senegal did inherit a legal framework based on French civil law tradition, the reality was that post-colonial governance in Senegal, due to what I said about the small elite dominating Senegal's economy, especially since Senegal was ruled by a single party and hence lacked a truly independent judiciary to force the rule of law that was respected by the Senegalese, and there were limited transparency and accountability mechanisms. and its indigenous institutions being subordinated. The legacy of colonialism continued after independence, and Senegal was faced with challenges related to consolidating power and controlling resources. Senegalese politicians often used their positions to enrich themselves and their supporters to encourage more people to support them against other politicians vying for power, and there was little accountability or transparency in government spending during this time, which often led to corruption and misappropriation of funds. Senegal, sadly, was a poor country in the early years of independence, since even though in the 1950s France was recovering from World War II, it was able to invest more into Senegalese healthcare, which led to a decline in mortality rates, especially among children, allowing Senegal's population to grow rapidly. Due to a combination of that and Senegal being a small country with few natural resources, in the early 1960s it made it difficult to develop an export-oriented economy and generate the foreign exchange needed to invest in development. This made it vulnerable to pressure from donors who sometimes turned a blind eye to corruption in order to maintain their influence in the country. This was especially true for France, which was Senegal's main donor in the early years of independence. France had a vested interest in maintaining its influence in Senegal, and it was willing to overlook corruption if it meant that Senegal would remain a close ally. You see, 70% of Senegal's trade in the 60s was with France, and Senegal benefited from a trade surplus in its favour with France. So if France decided to sanction Senegal, it could have been crippling. However, let's compare Senegal to countries in West Africa where industries were rarely, if ever, nationalised. Today there are roughly 30,000 Lebanese in Senegal, but you have between 40,000 and 150,000 Lebanese in Sierra Leone, around 75,000 in Nigeria. Hard to say how many in Ghana because Ghana has created the box for Ghanaian Arabs, but it's also a lot. And almost 300,000 Lebanese in Côte d'Ivoire, where they make up around 1% of the population, but more importantly make up around 7% of Abidjan's population. It's supposed that Lebanese Ivorians control around 40% of the economy of Côte d'Ivoire. This nationalization of many Senegalese industries basically prevented the Lebanese from doing what they were able to do in Côte d'Ivoire, and they slowly started to lose most of their markets against the Senegalese, which caused many to decide to migrate to Côte d'Ivoire. Also in contrast with Senegal is Sierra Leone, where Lebanese have controlled most of the diamond mining sectors. Qasim Basma, Hisham Maki, and Jamil Sahid Mohammed Khalil had controlled at least 3/4 of Sierra Leone's diamond exports. Moving further, in 1963 the Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation between Senegal and Mauritania was signed in order to promote peace and cooperation between the two countries, including the quote-unquote guarantee of free movement of people and goods between the two countries. In practice, it seems that there was a significant amount of movement of people between Senegal and Mauritania in the years following the signing of the treaty. However, there were also some restrictions on movement, such as the need for visas and work permits. Continuing our journey into the later 1960s, civil society organizations in Senegal played a key role in pressuring the government to reduce corruption. These organizations conducted their own investigations into corruption cases and published their findings. I think one of the reasons why this was a success, unlike in countries like Brazil, is because since Senegal had just gained independence, there was still a lot of momentum for a clean country, not just replacing French overlords with Senegalese ones. And also, since it just gained independence, it didn't even have the opportunity to have a history of military dictatorships like Brazil does. And the international community is probably sick of setting up or assisting civil society organizations in Brazil, since the military dictatorships would just brutally crack down on them. Moving into the 1970s, and the Senegalese government launched a number of public awareness campaigns to educate the public about the dangers of corruption and strengthen the judiciary by making it more independent and transparent. These campaigns helped to create a climate of intolerance for corruption among the Senegalese people and made it more difficult for corrupt officials to escape prosecution. And in 1975, Senegal, along with other countries, formed the Economic Community of West African States, also known as ECOWAS, to foster economic and political cooperation among its member states and to create a common market in West Africa. And the president implemented a land reform program aimed at redistributing land from the wealthy to the poor. This bold step helped to reduce inequality and improve the lives of many Senegalese people, ensuring that the benefits of the land were shared more equitably. The Anti-Corruption Commission, or ACC, was also established in 1972 to investigate and prosecute corruption cases. It was given broad powers to investigate corruption, and it was able to make a number of high-profile arrests. For those of you wondering why he did this when he was obviously either benefiting from Senegal's kleptocracy or could benefit from it, here are 4 hypotheses I came across on the screen. Also in the 1970s, the prices of commodities such as peanuts, fish and cotton fell, which led to a decline in Senegal's export earnings as it was a heavily agricultural country. Its economy was dependent on the export of those commodities. This, combined with the rise in oil prices in the 70s, put further strain on the country's balance of payments, exacerbating a trade deficit and poor management of state-owned enterprises. So maybe if the president didn't allow for all those things I mentioned that combated corruption, maybe he would have ended up in front of a firing squad. That's it for part 1, folks, and my announcement is that I am working on a book. And that's one of the reasons why this took so long. But I can do this more quickly if you guys help me. And believe me, there's a way any of you could help me. And check out these other YouTube channels of mine.